American taxpayers spent more than $150 billion towards government services for the 20 million illegal immigrants in the country, according to a recent study. So here to discuss is Matthew Peterson, editor-in-chief of Blaze News, and Daniel Horowitz, host of Conservative Review with Daniel Horowitz and senior editor for Blaze News. So Daniel, let's start with you. Why are Americans unwittingly funding all of this support for illegal immigration?
Well, we're a glutton for punishment. You know, I've been researching this issue, reporting on it for 16 years. And it's not just the numbers. It's qualitatively, this is the worst iteration of the invasion we've ever had. So you cited the study of 150 billion. That does not include a dynamic score of the gangs, the fentanyl trafficking, the child rapists in our communities, our neighborhoods. And then on the schooling, I think that study does cover somewhat of the schooling, but there's the cultural effect. I mean, there are 19 states now where we have more than 1 in 5 children in the public school system coming from immigrant households. Now, they're not all illegal, but a lot of them are. And that's just a measure of the fact that this is no longer America, which honestly is something you can't put a price tag on.
It's strange to me to think how few people probably are aware of this. Am I wrong? Do you think that most Americans understand how much this is draining from their coffers every year?
Honestly, I think outside of the gated neighborhoods, I think that is the difference between this iteration of the invasion and previous ones. Much to my chagrin, covering this, last decade, it never really pulled outside of the single digits in terms of the most prominent issue. This is really the time in history where immigration has become the most prominent, because I think while we often have the cameras at the border, we focus on the border chaos invasion, the cameras actually should be in the neighborhoods. And that's what we're seeing now. It's become so, again, quantitatively but qualitatively bad that you can't ignore it. It's not just an abstract principled issue of maybe fairness or cutting a line. The criminality has become so ubiquitous. I mean, Jill, what you started with that video from Aurora, Colorado, this Aragua gang is a big problem. This is a prison gang from Venezuela that has now come in large numbers, and they are brazen enough to openly attack police. One of the ones that was released by the Biden-Harris administration in El Paso was now, was charged for beating a police officer in Times Square, and we now know exactly when he was released. So the point is, this is a ubiquitous crime issue in addition to the cost issue that is really impossible to ignore. Republicans will never get an issue that is, on the one hand, this grave in consequence, but on the other hand, that is this easy to explain to the American people. You don't need to understand, Austrian economics to take our side of the issue. You see it in your neighborhoods.
We were talking about Massachusetts yesterday, and Massachusetts now is in the news because the Republican Party claims that state officials have refused to give the legal residents any details on $1 billion that they've spent on illegal immigration, and it's prompted the GOP to submit a FOIA request. So are the Massachusetts residents going to get any answers out of this, Daniel?
Well, I think given the orientation of the state and the brain drain of conservatives from that state, I don't think they will get answers because they're hopelessly in the minority. Just like this week in California, likewise, they voted and sent to the governor's desk a bill to give illegal alien homeowners first-time homeowner buyer credits, because we don't have enough of a housing crisis in this country already. This is a warning sign that what's going on in those states are things that we cannot do anything about. We are hopelessly in the minority. But where Republicans do have power, which is in the House at a federal level and in all these red states, that's where they need to push back. And again, at a federal level, Republicans need to have a border fight. No border, no budget. It's that simple. You will not catch and release criminals in the red states. We need to go in the opposite direction. So they're going and giving them benefits in blue states. In the red states, they need to make it a crime to be there illegally. They need to create enhancement penalties for committing a crime while being here illegally and cutting off all benefits so that if maybe the states can't keep them out of the country, at least they can keep them in Massachusetts and California, nowhere else. If our listeners will just go to the ICE Boston office and scroll down, it is remarkable. And this is the Biden administration. Just the past few weeks, the number of child rapists, fentanyl traffickers, and gangbangers that they have arrested that have been released at the border is just remarkable.
Yeah, Daniel, I think it's important for people to understand that we've already seen this happen in California, and it's not talked about enough. I mean, what's happened in California, this happened way before, people started talking about it nationally when you were sounding the alarm. We've already spent the money. We've already seen the consequences. And I think people need to realize, though, it's not just California now, right? The whole point is it's coming to a state near you. I'm hearing stories about, people finding Jamaican gang members in cornfields in the middle of Oklahoma, or also in Oklahoma, the Chinese making drugs in the middle of nowhere. I mean, this kind of stuff is my own brother recently told me a story driving down a rural road in Pennsylvania where there's no one out there. It's a road that we know about. And there was an illegal migrant, because a bunch of them has dropped off in the area, wandering around, and almost like he didn't know what was wrong with him. He had his scooters in the middle of this road. People drive 90 miles an hour in the middle of the country. I mean, it's a very strange scene, and you're right about the cameras. You're so right about that. Can you say a little bit more? Like, we have to show not the border. We have to show this happening all across America in places you least expect, because it's not just going to be an apartment complex that is taken over. That's going to be a town, and it's going to become a state, right? It's going to get larger and larger and larger. You're more in the weeds on this than a lot of people. Where are the next places where we'll start to see really negative side effects in red or purple states?
This is something that I'm very passionate about because, again, domestically, when you deal with domestic vagrants and criminality, there was always this understanding that you can move outside the cities, the big urban areas, and you're safe. And that's true, I think, of our domestic dynamic. But with the importation of illegals, they go everywhere. And this is something I've been reporting on also a lot throughout last decade. These establishment Republicans that feast on the carcass of America in order to pay out the agricultural lobbies that do have a stranglehold over a lot of these more rural red states, just so they can get cheap labor. And that's real nice. But what happens is they bring that criminal element to rural areas. Norman Rockwell's America. Obviously, we had Todd Bensman of Center for Immigration Studies, reported on that big colonia in Liberty County, Texas. But we have this growing in many other places, and you're starting to see it even in the school systems as well. Oklahoma is a big one. I mean, they import illegals because you have these Republicans there that love illegal immigration. At the same time, they legalize marijuana. So, yeah, you get the convergence of the two. And here's the thing, Matt. You bring up Oklahoma. The state passed a law to criminalize illegal presence. It was the first state to do it. Now, of course, they bring it to court, put an injunction on it. But the governor created a task force to rather than seeing how to implement the law, to do the exact opposite, to invite them to give them state-based driver's licenses, work permits, and visas. And they talk about welcoming immigrants. Now, if you're a legal immigrant, you're getting federal papers. You have a work permit, and you could get a driver's license in all 50 states. It means for illegal aliens. So here's the deal. While we have every Republican is speaking out against the border. That's different from when I started on this beat. But what hasn't changed is ultimately focusing on the way this issue matters in the red states, demagnetizing the presence of illegal aliens. The same Republicans don't want to do anything about it, and in fact, they want to encourage them more. They are working in states like Idaho and Oklahoma to give them driver's licenses.
Daniel, my final question for you. Everybody you talk to will either say Kamala Harris is lying or flip-flopping about her stance on immigration. Give me your 60-second take on what Kamala is doing on the border.
I don't blame her. I mean, the bottom line is Harris and the Democrats cannot survive a sustained focus on this issue. You know what I'm saying? A lot of Americans have been acculturated to dependency, certain programs, but nobody wants to fund other countries' bad people, child rapists, fentanyl traffickers, and gangbangers. I mean, this is not something they can defend, which is why my elevator pitch is, if Republicans want to win this election, they have a budget fight not on funding Head Start or some of these, fights we've had in the Gingrich era over funding other countries' criminals, catch and release of foreign invaders, foreign criminal aliens. It's that simple. If Republicans have a budget fight over that, then every day the news will be about their top issue. And frankly, there's no way she could sustain a win without changing her view on that.